Hey there, welcome back to the Path to Zion podcast, where we are rediscovering the ancient way. Whether you are listening to us over at pathtozion.com or one of the dozens of platforms, including here on YouTube, thank you so much for joining into the discussion today as we talk about when the fear of men pushes away the truth. Our primary text is going to be John chapter 12, verses 42 and 43, which says the following: "Nevertheless, many, even among the leaders, put their trust in Yeshua. But because of the Pharisees, they were not confessing Yeshua, so they would not be thrown out of the house of assembly. For they love the esteem of men more than the esteem of Elohim." Now, most of us are familiar with this text, and we know that it's worth highlighting and mentioning because it often gets overlooked. There were many teachers of the law. There were many people in the synagogue who received the message from the Messiah. They understood the covenant invitation that Messiah was extending to anyone who would listen. They received him. They put their trust in the Messiah. But they had a problem, which we see at the very end. They loved the esteem, some versions say the glory of men, more than the esteem of the Most High. Now, we have to understand that the power of religion and the traditions of men are very, very strong. These are strong spiritual forces, friend. Even in Messiah's day, there were leaders that heard and believed his message, yet they would not break away from the power of those who had neglected and had forsaken the Most High's Torah as being the ultimate way to live. The power of the Talmudic order was the established and authoritative rulership, not the Creator's ways. We try to highlight every time we talk about, quote, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the teachers of the law, because that's seen many times as just always an automatic negative. First of all, these were men that were entrusted to rightly handle, know, and disperse the way to live, the Creator's Torah instruction. Now, we have major problems that were already well established by the time Yeshua gets on the scene within the synagogue and within the Pharisaical order. These men had abandoned the Torah. Now, they still taught the Torah because we know that Messiah said what? When these men are sitting in the chair, the seat of Moses, listen to every single thing they're doing and do those things, yes. But what you see them doing when they go out into the streets, do not be like these hypocrites. Yeshua made that line distinction. We've talked about that endlessly over the years here on the program, if you want to search for that and find it. When seated in the chair of Moses, listen to these Pharisees, these teachers. Yes, Yeshua said. But do not do what they do, to make the distinction. But we have to highlight that there were men within this religious order that listened to and received, believed in, put their trust in Messiah, okay? So this is not a blanket statement of like, don't be like the Pharisees. There were that's why we always say here redundantly, there were non-believing Pharisees, and as we see here, they were, some of them, also placing their trust in Messiah as well, but they had this major hindrance, this major problem, that because of the other Pharisees, because of their leaders, their peers, they were not willing to confess Yeshua because they didn't want thrown out of the assembly, the synagogue. They didn't want to be put out, okay? And so to highlight the title of this message today, the fear of men pushed away the truth, okay? Now, we may be quick, if we're raised Christian, to just always mock, ridicule, tear down the actions and the behaviors of the Pharisees. We have tackled that on the program for years as well. People are hard towards, for example, Lot's wife, and how dare she look back, and I'm never looking back. The problem with this arrogant and obstinate teaching and approach, I guess, principle, is we forget real life examples. We forget that these were men and women that are not that much different, if any different, than us, friend. We just read things often coldly in the Bible. We don't insert ourselves into the text to think about what's going on. So these men were not ready to confess Yeshua to the point that they would have to be cast out of every single thing they know as normal life. Okay? This is not as cut and dry as, well, they were just hard-hearted, whitewashed tomb religious men who couldn't receive Jesus and the new gospel. No, friend, that's not a proper way to engage with this text, I don't think. The better way to see it is these are men who encountered Messiah. They put their trust in him. In other words, they believed the report from Yeshua's mouth that he was in fact the Son of Elohim. But they weren't willing to confess him openly amongst their peers in the house of assembly because they knew that it would cause them to be shunned, marked, and cast away. When you start talking about it in that light, it becomes more personally applicable, I believe, because that's how we have to approach these circumstances. These were real-life individuals, okay, who had to do what we read about endlessly in the New Testament, New Covenant writings are what? You have to count the cost. We've talked about that here in so many different ways, that the invitation to lose your life for the sake of the Messiah and get to a place where at all we can say it's no longer we that live, but Messiah in and through us, then we get to a place, friend, where we have to decide, am I willing to give my life and all that it will cost me to join myself covenantally to the Most High? This casual say a prayer, everything's going to get better for you the second you say the magic words that you, quote, believe in Jesus, gospel doctrine is heretical. It is not in agreement with the count the cost reality invitation into a covenant family. These men had to think through, was it worth losing their entire identity to confess that Yeshua was the Son of Elohim and who he was claiming to be? They couldn't do it. In this specific text in John chapter 12, 42 and 43, they couldn't do it. And what I want to make the connection for the next 10 or 15 minutes is saying that this same power and authority structure is doing the same thing today. It's continuing on in our age here in 2025, fixing to turn to 26. The same thing is repeating itself. So the power in this case, in Messiah's day, this power of the Talmudic order was obviously the established and authoritative order, not the Creator's ways anymore. Okay? This is where I regularly, often, parallel Talmudic Pharisaism with modern Christianity. Now, I know this is a real tough stretch for Christians today to comprehend. It's very offensive. I understand. It should be. It should be. But what then? Does offense lead to consideration or a wall of rejection? The Torah in this case, in John chapter 12, Messiah's day, that he's encountering these individuals in the house of assembly, in the synagogue, the Torah had been demoted. Father's instructions had been superseded. A new way was firmly established, and it would not tolerate being questioned. And here we start seeing familiarity towards the age that we live in. Very little, if anything, is different today, and sadly, the spirit of man's power remains as much now as it was in that synagogue years and years ago. A new order today is in place. A better way to live has been established as the acceptable way. It does not have to agree with the Torah and the prophets. And if you challenge this system and you get called out, ridiculed, mocked, pressured to conform, just like Messiah was and just like these men in John chapter 12. The power that demands men stay in a dysfunctional hierarchical order is fully intact today. The business that is labeled church it's this incredibly powerful machine, friend, of influence to no end. And even before we stop there now, even outside of the walls of churchianity, this is what people have to get through their minds. So many people have left the church, left organized religion, yes. But even outside of those walls, wide-way doctrinal powers keep men from continually moving forward still towards truth, willing to surrender to what Scripture says instead of popular opinion doctrines. Challenging concrete doctrines of men will get you nothing more than intolerance and scorn, friend. I'm raising my hand. I know this world. Now, why is this? Well, the same spirit, I would say, that requires obedience of the masses via manipulation and self-imposed authority has moved on into our present day here and now. Absolutely nothing has changed since Messiah's day. Men are still kept in line in every possible way, including doctrinally, friend. And many are pressured to stay in their place, even when they're confronted with what the truth of the true Messiah and the perpetual Torah of his Father say. Do you understand what I'm saying? This connection here. When the fear of men pushes away the truth, we have to count the cost, friend. And these men in John chapter 12 are the perfect example because they encountered Messiah Yeshua himself. And they heard what he said, and they watched what he did. And they made the connection, presumably, with the prophesied coming Messiah attributes. And they were willing to what? Put their trust in Messiah now. Okay, that's a big deal. They placed their trust into Messiah. We could do a word study, but I'm trying to keep this one very brief. But it was not enough because they were not confessing Yeshua in front of the powerful spirit of fear leaders that they were alongside. Because they knew that belief was one thing, but confession amongst the religious leaders would cause them to be thrown out of the assembly. It would cause them to be shunned, friend, cast away. We, too, have inherited a belief system that is so strong it may not look just the same, but the mental and spiritual inner stronghold and struggle and restraint remains fully intact today. You simply do not question the authoritative beliefs of the masses. You do not question Christmas. You do not question Easter. You do not question the Trinity. You do not question all these things that, quote, evangelical Christianity believe by the hordes. You don't question the movement of the Spirit. You don't discern and test the spirits. Why? You are out of line and you're being nothing but judgmental, critical, and legalist. It is an unspoken rule that many people have been deceived to think they are not under the influence of. But friend, I'm here to tell you, the same spirit that influenced these men who placed their trust in Messiah but were not willing to confess Yeshua, it's the same spirit today of causing fear of men to push away the truth. So what about you, friend? Here's a real heart matter question. We love to do that around here. We do it ourselves. Would you believe in something that you discover in the Word if it caused you to be thrown out of your assembly for it? Whether your assembly is a mega church of 10,000 people where people wouldn't even know that you left, or 10 people on a couch, friend, in a living room. Would you still place your trust in Yeshua if you were snubbed by your own family? If you were looked at kind of cockeyed and funny because you're going back, quote, under the law, and you're trying to be Jewish? Would you step into truth even if it cost you all that you've known to be right? If you go to a gathering anywhere and someone passes you a BLT and you say, I've studied those scriptures and I can't eat that anymore because the scriptures from beginning to end, from cover to cover, constantly reference clean and unclean animals, and I don't believe that that's ever been food for me. I'm sorry. Are you willing, friend, to venture out and look into things that disagree with the traditions of men? Are you found as one willing to always revisit what you believe and make changes, alterations as the Word reveals your error? When you encounter and believe, will you love the esteem of men, or will you desire the esteem of Elohim, the Most High? So when the fear of men pushes away the truth, friend, we're all restrained. We're all held back. Sometimes what is best is to believe and to be thrown out of the assembly, friend. May you count the cost today and choose well. You've been listening to the Path to Zion podcast. We're rediscovering the ancient way. Thank you so much for listening. Amen.